I'm Michelle.
I am Eugene.
We are from the SGLN Fellows 2025 cohort. We are super excited to have Mr. Pirakash join us. He's the head of Museum of Ice Cream in the Asia Pacific region. He leads the MOIC Asia Pacific headquarters located in Singapore.
So today's conversation is all about working effectively in complex and ambiguous environments. And I can't think of a better person than Pirakash, who led Museum of Ice Cream during the global pandemic. So Pirakash, I'm really excited to have you here today and to hear about how you brought imagination to life in Singapore.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be involved with the Museum of Ice Cream?
Well, sure. I started out my career in the public service, specifically at the Singapore Tourism Board as part of their Management Associate program. So I did go through a few different departments, but I finally ended up doing investment promotion. And that was sort of bringing in new concepts into Singapore. Singapore, we have big and bold ideas about things we want to bring into the country. But I was young and I was impatient, right? Doing something on the scale of, we have Universal Studios in Singapore and things like that take a very long time. So I was looking around, and looking at concepts that had worked very well or new and emerging concepts that, were very, very interesting and kind of taking the world by storm. And then I discovered Museum of Ice Cream. So that was quite a big sort of lead up, back and forth with sort of the founders there, because it was a relatively new company, only started in 2016, 2017. There were a series of pop-ups going everywhere. It was crazy because the queues for it, right? Like the waiting list for tickets is like 6-figure waiting list for tickets just because it was a pop-up. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, and can we get them to Singapore? For us here, being Singaporean and in Singapore, we want to be one of the first few to get the concepts, not after it's been around the whole world, then, we get it later. So that's how the journey really started. I reached out and, we managed to get connected. And somehow, between a few back and forths, we finally managed to get them to come to Singapore. And that was the period at which they were like, would you like to come and join us and help us build this thing? To which I said, no, I'm not an operator, and I don't feel like I have the necessary experience. But the founders, Manish and Mary Alice, managed to convince me otherwise after talking for a few times. So in sort of late 2019, I joined the company.
That's very impressive. So from what I understand, Singapore is the first international outpost outside of the US. In the US now you have 5 locations in Austin, Miami, Chicago, New York, and Boston. So these were all, I guess, established pre-COVID, or some of them. And for Singapore, I think it was started in August 2021. If I recall, that's the height of COVID. It seems a little bit counterintuitive because during the COVID era, it's it's where physical touch and immersive experiences, it's, forbidden, so to speak. So, what made you decide that, that was a good time or juncture to actually open up the business here?
Well, what was interesting was actually, as I said, earlier, we were a company that did pop-ups, and actually New York City, we launched it in December 2019, and that was the first permanent location. So I was actually in New York helping to open that museum, and we signed the lease for Singapore in December 2019. So and that was interesting. The company had done obviously relatively well, sort of smaller scale pop-ups, and this was the time where, hey, we're going to go grow and we're going to invest in this huge physical space. And if you're familiar with New York, it's right on Broadway in the middle of Soho, so a very, very prime location that we had to build. And so I remember sitting in our office in Tribeca in I believe it was February 2020, and then we're hearing like all these things about this virus and like maybe you should wear masks. And then I was like, should I get back home before I can't go back? And so I ended up coming back to Singapore, and then as we know it, in March 2020, that was when it hit, and it hit fully. So for us, we've managed to finally open in August of 2021, but the memory is still very fresh to me. It's something that it was hard to see that we were going to open because what happened was for us, there was a double whammy. If you remember, the hardest place hit in the world after Wuhan was New York City. And we had to open in New York City, spend the millions of dollars on a new location, and we just couldn't operate, right? So we couldn't operate, we couldn't pivot to anything. We were a new company. And in Singapore, even worse, we don't even have a physical site. The construction had to be halted. The location was just left as it was. You have a whole team and you're like, what are we going to do? How do we survive, right? And I think it's also something that was quite personal because your initial team members end up being people that so you convince people to leave their jobs, come with you towards this dream and this ambition, and then you realize, are they even left the job? Are we going to be able to even pay them their salary? And so I think it was a really hard time, but we just knew that we had to make it work. And in COVID, as we all know, there are a lot of ups and downs. Heighten alert, close, heighten alert, close, heighten alert, close. So for us, I think a lot of it just had to do with, we knew what experience we wanted to deliver. I think we knew that people wanted or were looking for such an experience. I think just in Singapore in itself, or even in the region, when it comes to attractions, just the level of innovation hasn't been that much, right? We have a few that have been around for a very long time. People are familiar with it. Obviously, they're successful and they do well. But I think there was a need for something new. And we could feel that because I was just looking for different opportunities where we could actually open and obviously get some sort of revenue. So we actually did kind of like a mini pop-up in April of 21, promising people that you buy tickets today and we will open in August 2021. And we sold out like 3 months worth of tickets in 2 days. So
wow.
So I think we could really sense that there was that people wanted it and people were happy to believe in us and support in us, which we're very grateful for. Got some revenue, which was much needed. And then when we opened in August 21, we obviously had to adapt. We had to adapt a lot. Museum of Ice Cream was started by the co-founders because they were in New York City. So many experiences, but a lot of what we felt were the people were not connecting with each other. Everyone was on their phones, even with this technology that's supposed to bring us closer together, it's actually isolating us even more. So it was like, how do we drive connection? How do we get people into a space where they're not thinking about what's happening in the world outside, you're in there, and how do we get them to interact with each other? And I think, at the start, that was really a big driving force of getting people to strangers who don't know each other. How do you come into the space and how do we get them to interact with each other? Because we feel like that's really what's fulfilling, building that human connection, and sometimes we lose it. And we can go into, culturally how that works in the Asian context versus the Western context. But we feel that the need for human connection was a bit universal. And so even when we had to do safe distancing, you come into a physical attraction, you cannot, you can't touch things. You're wearing a mask. It's hard to connect with someone when you're wearing a mask. You can't even come in with your whole group of friends because it was 2, then it was 5, then it was 2. So it required us to be, really quite nimble. And we just had to keep responding every day to new challenges and keeping in mind that we are very much, or were very much, a startup, right? So it's not that you have super deep pockets or a lot of cash to burn. Every decision that you make is really truly impacts your ability to survive and operate, whether it's the next month or the month after that. So I would say, truly a very interesting time.
Yeah, so it is very much in line with the team, right, which is working effectively in a complex, ambiguous environment. Both the experience itself that you are trying to bring in using Museum of Ice Cream, and the whole concept itself is a new one in Singapore, right? So what drives you to do this?
Well, I as I said, I think I felt that there was a need for something that was new. I think we felt that the attraction and also this sort of experience, and we have a term, we call it experium. We felt that was something that people wanted, and we felt that was something people needed. And so I think that was the first thing, believe that the concept could work. And, it kind of had been market tested already, right? It wasn't something that was brand new. In the US, we saw it, the success, because the pop-ups, did it in New York, then Miami, LA, San Francisco, and then the San Francisco pop-up, we kind of converted it to sort of like a semi-permanent space. So we saw that the demand was there and people were responding well to it. And so I knew that, that was experience that we could deliver. But I think beyond that, what pushed me to sort of like make it work was, I think, with all of us, everything we do, whether it's a company we're building or a project that we're doing, we do it because inherently we want something to succeed. But I think I was also driven very much by the fact that it became kind of personal in the sense that I had kind of staked quite a fair bit in it. But more importantly, my team, which was with me at the start, they stayed with me, and even at the point where we couldn't pay them, they were like, it's okay, we believe that, we'll come back, and they stuck together with me to try and make it work. So at that point I was like, we have to do what it takes to make it work, just to give it back to the people that believe in you. And I think, that was sort of helped that resilience factor a bit. And yeah, that's how we ended up with it, and we're still open today.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
How would you describe your leadership style in one sentence? Right. So like with all the experience that you have and all the ambiguity that you have went through together with a very strong team, like marching behind you, right?
Well, I would say that it's hard to answer that question because I feel like I'm still pretty early in this journey and I'm still discovering what it is. But I feel like for me, and with my team, I think there's a lot of candor and empowerment. So believing in your team and empowering them to go and run specific things and do things by themselves, right? Making them feel that they can do it, right? I think that would be, if you wanted to say in a sentence, I think it would be empowering. And I think also candor and transparency is very important in the sense that no one is siloed. For me, what is very important is even unrelated departments, everyone gets pulled together for a meeting. And I started off by telling them that, hey guys, I know that for some of you, some aspects of this might be a waste of time, right? Like we're all trying to be a bit productive. But I say I want everyone to know what's going on because whether it's the operations department, whether it's the marketing department, whether it's sales, whether it's, the rest of the BD guys, everything is intertwined and we're not, like a super huge company, right? You can't do things in isolation because there's a knock-on effect on everyone else inside of the team. So that sort of transparency with like, how are we making decisions? Why are we doing it? Explaining it, because I feel like if it just comes from top down as a directive, people on the ground are not going to be able to understand it. And then when there's pushback from the ground, then everyone on top is like, why are they not able to do it? So yeah, I think it would be empowering and candid or transparent. Yeah.
So I think, with you starting during the pandemic, there's no playbook that you can follow, so to speak, because of the ambiguity, coming back to our topic. And then also it being the first international outpost. What were some of the pressures, that you had to ensure that Singapore was successful? And also, were there any challenges or were there any doubts along the way? For example, because of the timing of the opening and where it met with the heightened alerts as well. Were there any thoughts maybe sometimes that you say, maybe we can push back this project until the borders reopened, maybe we can get more certainty in terms of success?
Well, I think a lot of the pressure was something that we as a team put on ourselves. I think we also need to understand that this is, at the end of the day, the concept is American. We're here in Singapore. They obviously believe in us and they think that we can succeed. But the priority is going to be in the economy that is obviously the bigger one, the more successful one. So for us, it's like, hey, are we going to be able to make this work and make this survive, right? Because as you know, they are suffering there in New York as well, right? The whole team and things like that, people that you have to furlough, it was a hard time for them. So I think for us, we knew that it was kind of do or die. We had to make it work. And then we had to go and try and find whatever means it took. I remember the first few things that I did was trying to go and like literally find sponsorship, right? Say, hey, let me sell this space and let me get this sponsorship. You just give me cash now, right? And trust me, we'll open, and when we open, we'll give you this. And that really helped, right? Even if it was like a few $100,000 coming in, what we really needed was that sort of cash flow to keep it going. Because if you do remember, even though the government did come in with some aids during COVID, like job support scheme, etc., that really required you to have some degree of cash flow, because it's like, hey, pay your employee first and then you get reimbursed. And then it's like, if you're not generating cash, how do you pay to get reimbursed?
It's based on reimbursement, right?
Yeah, we know it's a Singapore style reimbursement. We want to make sure we are very responsible with the taxpayer money. And so I think that pressure was that kind of pressure that we put on ourselves. But I think to the second point about how did we deal with pivoting and sort of that ambiguous landscape, I think it's different for companies of different sizes. Firstly, we were relatively small as a startup, which allowed us to be a lot more nimble, right? And it meant that in terms of the established playbook and how things used to exist at that point in time, we could rewrite it. It wasn't, you would see in obviously bigger companies, there are a lot more departments, a lot more structures, a lot more bureaucracy, as you would say. For me, I was able to say, hey, okay, look, this is what the experience was. Now, this is how the experience can be in this space. And so we could move very quickly because I think the senior leadership in the US as well, together with us, like every single night we were on calls at midnight and just talking about it, and with no end in sight of when this would end. But we're like, okay, how do we change? How do we pivot? How do we make it work? And so I think there was a lot of innovation going on at that time to see how we could really change the experience, and that hadn't really been challenged, right? Because it was already so successful. So how do we make it successful in this new environment? And that required the team to really come together, like all of the departments, and just work through it. And then when someone throws out an idea of how we can do it, okay, do we immediately go and test whether we can do it? And then there's that immediate feedback as well, right? Hey, today we tried this happened and this didn't work. Okay, how do we change, pivot, go, right? And keep iterating until we get it right. So I do think that in that specific sense, being small helped us because we were a lot more lean, a lot more agile.
How do you maintain everyone to be motivated with such high level of grit, right? And the daily grind. I mean, when you describe it, but day in, day out, you have to, look at it and make changes, stay relevant, and dynamically change things on the fly, right?
Yeah.
So how does the team stay so focused and motivated?
I think a large part of credit is to the team itself. I think sometimes when you're joining something that is lean or young, there's a certain personality type that's willing to do that and also willing to accept that, hey, it's not going to be like, all smooth sailing, right? So I think a large part to the team, and, this was a team that said, even if we're not getting paid, we're willing to work. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go and find something else or do something else. So I think a large part we had to give it them. But I think ultimately we had that common sense of purpose. And I think we believed that we would open. I think we believed that we would be successful, and that all we needed to do was just come together, hang in there until it opened, right? And that was a time where the circuit breaker heightened alert. I still remember, when we were in the office, then we would rush, and then at that time, Prime Minister Lee would be like, "Come on, with his cup, with his cup," and then we were like, "Okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?" So I think together we just had that common sense of purpose that we felt that this was going to be successful, that we could pull it off. And it was just a matter of time before we did it. So it was like, hang in there.
Yeah, the way you have described it is like running a marathon with no end in sight. And everybody, as a team still running, keep on running.
Correct.
It's amazing.
I mean, I think not just us, a lot of people had to pivot. A lot of different companies had different challenges of different sizes during COVID. So I think, COVID is one thing, but I think just in general, we have already seen a lot of things, even happening in the world today that are like, are we going to be able to function properly? Our forecast going to succeed. And I think at the end of the day, if you know that you are going to be able to deliver something, a specific experience, you have a goal and a mission where we want to get people excited about something. We want to deliver something. And my team was all Singaporean. The Singaporean team was all Singaporean. And say, hey, we wanted to do something, that we can be proud of here in Singapore, and that affects, the lives of the people that we know. And I think that really helped.
Maybe just building up a little bit on that team dynamics. So apart from your team, I think other stakeholders, apart from your customers as well as your partnerships, right? So I think I see that a lot of the ice cream brands that you work with are local brands like Danzy, like Kind Cones. So in the times of pandemic, during those times, how did you manage to, seek help from them or seek partnership? Did you have to pivot? Did you have to, find different suppliers? And then, you had to pivot because of certain constraints or whatnot.
I think when we looked to opening Museum of Ice Cream Singapore, I was quite determined to ensure that there were Singaporean elements that were displayed. It's not just a copy or paste of an American experience that we put in Singapore and we're like, here's this American thing, go and do it. And I think another thing that personally I wanted to do was take this as an opportunity to showcase Singapore, because we obviously get a lot of tourists, right? So people that are coming in, average length of stay of a tourist in Singapore is 3 days. How can we teach them just a little bit, right, about Singapore, about Singaporean culture or our history, in fact? And also I wanted to use this as an opportunity to be able to showcase sort of the talent we had in Singapore. So when it comes back to local sort of ice cream and independent shops, I actually didn't take, we paid everyone, right? So it wasn't, hey, give us free product and we'll give you free advertising. If you want to give us a good rate, that's fine. But for me, it was, we want to make sure that we are paying them, because I think that for a lot of these guys and the smaller ones as well, it's hard for them to survive. They were affected by the same things. They couldn't operate their volumes, and we were slightly larger than a lot of these brands, and so it's not just the ones that you mentioned. There were a few others that we put inside. And I would like to put so many more inside. They're just not able to keep up with our volume, right? Because of the number of people that we put through the space. So I went and got money from the bigger, more established brands. So we did have an Häagen-Dazs room, and then now we have Ben and Jerry's as well. Okay. So, these are the guys that were, it was a happy, win-win partnership for both of us. And then it also allows us to support paying the rest of the ice cream manufacturers and the people that are putting sort of their heart and soul into creating very, very unique flavors. And it's great because people who come in, they're like, oh, what is this? What is this? What is this pandan flavor? What is this chendol flavor? And then if they don't go to Orchard Road, we get to introduce them to the ice cream sandwich. We get to introduce them to potong ice cream. Yes. And small little things that we wanted to do that we somehow managed to do.
Ice cream flavors in Singapore is like truly very Singaporean, right?
Indeed, yeah.
It does have a Singapore identity, right? Many of the flavors that you talk about will be so alien in like all parts of US. They have never heard of like pandan.
Exactly.
Right? And even the potong ice cream, I think that is alien to them as well.
Yeah, for them, they have their own versions as well. They're very familiar with popsicles and stuff like that. But then what's potong? And then when you come into our potong room, obviously our space is, it's an experiential space. A lot of it is imagination for you to take in the space where you are and connect. But we also do have like factoids of like, oh, what is potong, right? It means cut, right? And what do we used to do? That's in the 60s and the 70s, that was really, really very popular. And how is ice cream served? So these are little fun things. And, we see the biggest, our biggest issue is that we call ourselves the Museum of Ice Cream and we're like, we're not a museum, and everyone's like, where's the education in this space? And I was like, no, it's for us, we impart a bit of it, right? But it's a space for you to have a bit more fun, not so serious, a lot of things. Every day we are dealing with things that are very serious. So when you come to a place to, find joy and connection, we don't want to bombard you with the facts, but we also want to be able to tell you a little bit more about, hey, you're here in Singapore, this is what Singaporeans do. This is what Singaporeans used to do.
It's a new concept.
It is. And we've introduced things that we used to do in the past, right? Whether it's just the way we eat our ice cream. So hopefully we succeeded there.
No, but I think nonetheless, a little tidbit that I learned from Museum of Ice Cream is that actually the chocolate flavor came before the vanilla flavor.
Yep.
So yeah, it's still, I think educational.
when you come into the space, we've done quite a fair bit of it. I think there's fun trivia, right? And there's really studying. So we do have quite a few rooms where you do get very relevant fun facts and trivia about ice cream, and maybe inspire someone to go and learn a bit more. Then we've done our job.
Was there any new innovation that came about through the pandemic? It is a very trying time. And was there any big innovation that came out of it?
I think we tried not to go too far away from the experience. Like when I told you the genesis of how the museum started, it was, there's technology and technology is isolating us. Let's try to be as tech-free as possible. But a lot of the innovations that happened during the pandemic were tech-related, right? We are going to get on Zoom, right? We're going to be working from home. And so, in fact, that was a challenge. It was pushing us further away from our goal.
Exactly.
And so, when you're trying to innovate inside of the space, we're like, how can we still try and find meaning and connection with each other, even if we can't see each other, if we can't, not touching each other, but just physically you have a mask and things like that. So I wouldn't say that we did too much innovation inside of the space or the experience. Obviously we had to remove things that were tactile. How do we give out things that people can have their own personalized items? How do we deal with consuming food inside a space when you're not supposed to be exposing your mouth?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think it was more operational sort of innovations. It wasn't this one big idea or hey, do we make the museum a virtual one and people walk through? That would have gone too far away from what we were trying to deliver. So that's not something that that we actively tried to do, even though we did consider it.
I think we've been talking a lot about pandemic, but it seems not too long ago, but it has been 5 years. So fast forward to today, I believe that ambiguity doesn't go away; it evolves.
Yep.
So how do you think, through the passage of time, that you have evolved as a leader? How have you sort of pivoted the business, or think of changing the experiential experience to today's context?
I think for us, when we look at how the museum has evolved over the past 5 years, every location that we open is an improvement over the previous one. We are continually iterating. We are taking feedback into what works and what doesn't work. And it also comes together at a time where the company is moving from, we're a startup, to a bit more, we're a bit more sort of like an established kind of company. And where do we want to go from there, right? And so then, when you get from a, 7 to 8 to 9 figure ref, then you have to grow accordingly. So I think that there is quite a fair bit of innovation in terms of our spaces. If you go and look at where we were on day one versus where we are now, we haven't been like, okay, we're going to be completely tech free. There are some places where technology can augment and technology can help. But I think that what's also been interesting personally for me is you go from startup mode to, okay, we have now grown, and with that comes all these different departments. And back in the day when I wanted to do something, we did it immediately. Now when I want to do something, I'm like, we can't do it immediately, right? And you want everyone in the business to kind of feel involved. People have different ownerships over different departments. And then this is exacerbated by the fact that, we're kind of an international company, and then we have to deal with the Singapore to US time difference and time lag. So it's not even I can't do it today. I send the message and then it has to work through that work day. Then he has to come back and we have to iterate and we have to go back and forth. So, that has been learning growth for me and for our company as well. You bring in, sort of like professional managers, they bring in their expertise at other companies. They've improved the company a lot, improve the experience for the employees, improve our efficiencies and things like that. But we just haven't been able to, you're not able to move with the same sort of speed. So there are trade-offs there. And for us, it's something that you have to learn to manage. You have to learn to be, okay, I need to change my style from, we're at like 100
Bulldozing.
and top gear, all the time to, okay, let's dial it back a bit. Let's try and see how can we, dual path certain things and still keeping in mind what our main objectives are. Like, what do we need to deliver at the end of the day? So I think that's how we would have changed. And you also see the physical space changing. A large part of driving the connection are our what we call our scoops, our ambassadors that are on the ground. And the way they interact with people, the way they get training, a lot of that has also changed. So it's not something that is very apparent from a customer-facing standpoint. You come in, you get the experience, but the person that's delivering it and how we package it together is something that's continuously changing. And I think people in the company today are better off for it. And then that translates to our guest satisfaction also being better. So it's a constant work in progress, and we'll continue to see it because we've just announced that we're opening Las Vegas next year, and we have another location that's signed. So we're opening at the rate of like 2 museums each year, and that's quite a fair bit of work. So just getting those things running and working operationally is a challenge.
So with your experience, right, what advice would you give to other leaders or entrepreneurs trying to launch something new in Singapore, right, that is very unpredictable? And what advice would you have for them?
I think you need to have conviction in what you're trying to do. And I think the most important thing is trying to remember why you set out to do it in the first place. There are, I think, 99 reasons not to do something, and everyone else will remind you of why you shouldn't be doing something or why it's hard to do something. But everything is hard, right? So you just have to choose your hard and stick with it. And I think ultimately, if you have the conviction and you know that something is going to add value, I think pushing ahead, at some point, sometimes you need to say, okay, this is not working. But I think if you do have that strong conviction and you feel convicted enough to start something and go and do it, I think seeing it through, whether the intended outcome is what you wanted, I think you'll be a better person for it regardless. And I think here, especially in Singapore, we're quite blessed in the sense that there is quite a bit of opportunity, right? Like, you can go to different industries, there's a lot of different jobs and things that you can try. So the risk is multiplied in the sense that you're like, the opportunity cost of doing something can be quite high. And I think I see that quite a fair bit with, whether it's my peers, and people around me. And even when I go back and talk to, the students from the university, you see that, right? But, like another entrepreneur friend of mine said, being an entrepreneur is like, it's like chewing on glass. And you just have to...
So
Not ice cream.
Sadly, the sweet things at the end of the day, maybe you get to enjoy ice cream at the end of it. But I think that process, going through it, it's like you said, like running a marathon or training for it, right? Like you just have to get up, you got to do it and trust in the process that it will deliver the outcome at the end of the day. Yeah. I also don't say it as I think I'm a very experienced leader or anything like that. This is just, my personal experience, seeing my peers around me who have started and done things. Generally, the common thread is like the conviction is there.
You mentioned a little bit about, future expansions, and then you have something in the pipeline in Vegas. What are some of the key takeaways maybe, that thought you through setting up Singapore that you could maybe use in future setups or future business expansions?
We're in a unique place, and I think I'm quite privileged to have been able to see a startup that's trying to concurrently work in the US and Singapore context. And what we realize is, of course, the economy is different. The deals that we can sign are also a bit different. How we interact with sort of the players in the real estate here versus in the US, it's quite different. But I also opened pop-up in Shanghai. So we had a 1-year deal, which we did also during their delayed pandemic. So it was fun. I got to relive the pandemic twice. And I think the main thing we can see is that in the US, the expansion is easier in the sense that the States, even though, we talk about West Coast, East Coast,
Yes.
Central America, it's pretty homogeneous. You're conducting business in English, the laws and the rules and the regulations, they're pretty much the same. Or it's something that your businesses and your support there is able to understand, able to work with. But when you come into a context like Singapore, it's okay. Singapore is also, not too hard to do business. But then if you go to China, then it's like, hey, you got to teach them how to deliver the experience in Chinese, right?
Yeah.
And then we had to teach them how to do it over Zoom because we couldn't be there to train in
wow.
person because, in China, remember, you couldn't go in,
Yes.
right? You couldn't go in. So that was something that was really hard. And so when we think about expansion in two different countries, and I think this is also the challenge that we see with talking about Southeast Asia as a block. It's not
Different
homogeneous.
culture,
It's the culture. It's culturally different. The doing business is hard in each country in Southeast Asia, and then we talk about whether it's North Asia, the rest of Asia, going to Australia, specific challenges there. So I think it's unique to be able to straddle looking at these different geographies and how they work. And then you also understand, hey, why are companies, sort of successful in one geography might not necessarily be successful in the other. So I think the takeaways for us is trying to find places where we know that it can potentially work, that, culturally the experience is something that people want, and that the economic conditions need to line up and the demographics need to line up. It's not about blindly just saying, oh, there's an opportunity that exists here, let me go into it. Because, even if someone paid us to do it, I think the damage to the brand of not being successful, especially when we're trying to grow, we're trying to establish and build something, it would be quite great. So, it's really about being able to evaluate those things holistically, not just grow for the sake of growing, but growing in a sustainable manner. And also staying true to your sort of like values and your mission. I think that would be, that takeaway as we grow.
How do you convince them to have the first out of US location in Singapore? I'm personally, very very keen to find out what is so special. Is it the way you convince them? Some special skill sets you have that you bring to the table? Or what Singapore has, or what did you or Singapore as a site, did right?
Well, I think a lot of the work was done for me in the fact that what Singapore is now, right? It's a very successful city state. Culturally as well, we understand a lot of things that come from the West. We're very accepting of those things. Singapore is a melting pot of cultures, and also in terms of just the demographics, right? Number of people that will be keen to go for this sort of experiences, the number of tourists that come into the space. So a lot of that work was done for me, and it was like, hey, this is Singapore, it's great, right? And when you have a company that's based so far on the other side of the world, they're like, why would we? This is 12-hour time difference, or 15 hours if you're on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And why would we consider Singapore? So I think a lot about it is that we have to make ourselves known, make ourselves heard. I think when we're Singaporean here in Singapore, we're like, yeah, Singapore's great, but to everyone else, it's like, yeah, it's great. Then this is why you should do it. So I guess the setting and the atmosphere was right. I think also obviously we do have, we make ourselves quite business friendly, and I think that is key, very important to give confidence, and then just persuading them that this is gonna work. Let's try. And it was like a 2-year process. So
you should be a very good person to persuade and convince.
Well, hopefully we managed to do it for this one. So but as I said, a lot of the groundwork was really laid for me. Singapore is doing very well, and I think other businesses and other companies should definitely come here. Other attractions as well. I think when we have more and we have more offerings, more people are going to come, and so that's the win-win that we like.
Fantastic. So what are you most proud of for Museum of Singapore, Museum of Ice Cream in Singapore?
I think I'm proud that we survived and that we are doing well. We've been growing year on year, which is also not easy considering sort of just the macroeconomic climate. There's a lot of challenges. Sometimes Singapore is very good. Singapore dollar is very strong, which means that it's very expensive for our main source market to come here. And I think looking back on it, it's just surviving. The chances of us having made it out of the pandemic were very, very low. And I think we found a way to make it happen. And I think we managed to do it in a way that kept the team, together, that managed to deliver on our experience without sort of compromising on our values. And I think I'm just quite proud that, we continue to function as a business.
What do you learn about resilience, right? Both personal and organizational during that time?
Well, I learned that a lot of us are very resilient. I think I felt that with my team, and also I guess maybe if I can segue it into something that I like doing as part of like my hobbies and stuff like that is endurance sports, right? And doing endurance sports it's always a challenge of like, hey, how much are you going to push yourself? So whether you're doing an Ironman, whether you're doing a Grand Fondo, which is a very long, like, sort of like cycling race, right? Or even when, like, let's say even you're trekking to Everest Base Camp, for example, it's always a challenge in how much, you can push yourself and trying to find your limits, right? And so whenever you get, setbacks and whether you get injured along the way, things don't go according to plan, you don't just give up and say, oh, okay, I'm going to give up and I'm not going to go and accomplish this, or I've signed up for this event and I'm not going to go and do this event, right? You're going to find ways around it. You're going to adapt. And I think a large part of it is if you set your mind to doing something and you know that there isn't something like super catastrophic that has happened to you, no reason not to go and push, right? I think that we are in a relatively fortunate environment. It's not a do or die scenario. So a lot of things are very uncomfortable every day. I mean, growth is you have to overcome things that are uncomfortable. And when it comes to things that you strongly believe in and you believe that it's going to make a difference or something that's going to succeed, then you just have to push. There's, as I said earlier, there's a lot of reasons not to do something, but you just need to focus on why you are doing something and what the outcome is going to be, and you just keep going until it's just physically not possible to do so anymore. And I think that it's a trait that many of us share, not just the people in my team. I think if you're just seeing everyone, whenever there's adversity all the time. I think we all have it in us to varying degrees. Sometimes we just need things outside other macro factors to really show us how resilient we are. Although, we just hope that, life can be very comfortable and easy. I think you don't know how much you can take until you're really put to the test and you're pushed. And we all learn that at different times. So, for us and with this business specifically, it just happened to be the pandemic. For another business, it could be something else. So this is just what I learned of myself and what my team learned of itself during this time for us.
We are convinced we are going to take up a challenge tomorrow.
We'll sign you up for an Ironman.
So building up on that quality of resilience and also tying back with the objective of SGLN, what advice would you give to our aspiring leaders or innovative entrepreneurs about the global leadership and what it takes to be there, given that you work a lot with your US counterparts as well?
Well, I feel I should be taking advice from most of your cohort and not giving it. But I think for me personally, born, raised Singapore, gone through the Singapore system, right? I think that to some degree we are a bit sheltered and I think that we are also very comfortable operating in the Singapore environment. But then when you go outside to the rest of the world, I think it's a bit different. So learning how to, sort of like say intercultural communication, I'm sure that's a module in some university. Working with across different cultures is something that you have to learn. I think it's very important to go out, expose yourself, immerse yourself, because people around the world work very differently. And I think that is something that is really important. I think what I really like to do, and I think it's great that sort of SGLN exists. I think seeing more Singaporean leaders and all of these big MNCs is something that will make all of us very proud. And I think that really requires us to have that exposure because you're not going to learn how to deal with it without actually being in it. And Singapore, at the end of the day, we're very, very small. When I deal with the US, which is the largest economy in the world, you can really see the differences. people are going to be focused on the one that's making the big bucks. So how do we make ourselves relevant? And I think we managed to do that because for us specifically, the US obviously is very big. The numbers they do is very, very large. But we're able to bring in our own innovations, little things like, hey, how do we work in this Singapore environment actually? And then we find that, hey, we're actually able to deliver a lot of efficiencies, right? And now the way that they conduct their team meetings, even how they do sort of just the experience itself is something that they take a lot from the Singapore team, because we had to operate with a lot more constraints, right? So I think that there's always something that we can add value to. So we need to be cognizant of that. But we also need to learn how to work with these different cultures, and especially the different cultures. Like for me, it's specifically the US. So I would say, the world's a big place. I think that we add some value. So we should be confident ourselves that we can add value, but we also should be open and humble enough to learn from, all these different other places that have been doing great things for a long time.
So thank you, Prakash,
Thank you.
for taking on the journey and going behind the scenes of Museum of Ice Cream. It's been very insightful, very aspiring, and you have given us a lot of insights on sort of brand building as well. Maybe just to cap it off, when you go in and you first experience the Museum of Ice Cream, they'll ask you for an ice cream name. So what would yours be?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed the chat. And coming back to my ice cream name, this is a culture in the company. Actually, all of us have ice cream names, and our official email is our ice cream name. So going back to what I said, I think we're quite proud to be from Singapore, be from Southeast Asia, and I wanted to really represent that. So my ice cream name is cendol. It's a dessert that I love. It's very Singaporean, I would say Southeast Asian. And so even though it's so hard for the Americans to be like, cendol, like what's cendol? I still persist with having that as my name. And we address each other with like by our ice cream names in the company. So that's how cendol came about. The rest of my team, especially my team that started, is Kaya, Pandan. I have a Onde. So we're really truly representing Singapore and Southeast Asian flavors.
Is vanilla taken? I think I will name myself vanilla.
You can name yourself anything you want.
But is it taken?
We actually do not have a vanilla. We have we have like a vanilla ice, I think. Yeah, no vanilla.
What about you, Eugene? What will be yours?
I think gelling out with the team of today, I would say conquer the world. So it's a bit of a pun.
Yeah.
Well done. Well, I look forward to having you at the museum, and hopefully you have a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.